Well, the thing is, obviously you all come here to hear mostly Paul Auster, not myself. So I'm just I'm trying to be very, very, short on my questions or comments, and try just to make Paul talk. The first thing I wanted to say is the title of the book, which it's a winter journal in English and Diario de Invierno in Spanish. This creates a nice sort of a linguistic problem, because in Spain we distinguish, as you might know, between in English you have diary, which is a different thing, more or less, and journal. And we use diario for everything, in the sense also of agenda, no?
Yes, right.
Agenda, no? And in a way, while I was reading the book, I was thinking that, in fact, the book is more a diary than a journal, although it's called a journal. A diary and a memoir, but a diary first.
Well, in English, a diary would be a kind of book that you give to kids.
Yes.
And there's about this much for each day. You say, I went to school, I took a math test, I had spinach for dinner, I went to sleep. That's a diary.
Yes, but
a journal is unlimited amount of space.
Yes.
For whatever reflections you want to make about something.
Yes, I understand. But the thing is that, the idea is that, what the idea I had while reading the book is that, the book is more a memoir, a memoir than a journal, because it doesn't follow the journal thing. But it has this element that you just explained right now of a diary, because the book plays a lot with the idea of writing small things, longer or shorter, like a kid or a young man would do, listings, for instance. There is a lot of lists of things,
I love lists. I've always liked lists. I'm a great admirer of lists. I think I got the idea of lists from Rabelais years and years ago. He was the greatest list maker in literature.
No.
James Joyce is probably the second greatest list maker. There's something so wonderful about the list that I've often indulged myself in that. But I want to talk about the title just for a second too.
Yes.
Winter Journal sounds in English a lot like Winter Journey, which is the English translation of the song cycle by Franz Schubert,
Winterreise.
And so I was thinking about that as well. And then at one point I say, writing this journal, this journey through winter, and I was referring directly to Schubert.
Oh,
but that doesn't work in Spanish.
Well, yes, Viaje de Invierno, it's called, and in fact there's quite a very outstanding novel by a Spanish novelist who is called Viaje de Invierno, and many years ago, and yes, well, it doesn't work because, of course, the sound is not the same, but the idea, now that you explain it, it's nice, yes, it's nice, because it's a very winterish book in a way.
Well,
yes,
I was writing it during the winter. I mean, I literally began January 3rd, 2011. I remember the day. It was snowing. And I started writing the book. And I wrote it in a rather short period of time. By early May, I was done. And then I spent a couple of months tweaking it, as they say, making revisions and cuts. But it was essentially finished. So it was about a 4-month project. And so I was writing quite a bit every day, more than I usually do. And there it is. So it is the book that I wrote during the winter. I barely got into spring.
And there are a lot of winter scenes and winter elements and snow.
As it happened, last year in New York, in the east coast of the United States, was a brutal winter. It was one of the worst winters I've ever experienced. And we had snowstorm after snowstorm after snowstorm. It was endless. And if it wasn't snowing, then it was raining, icy rain. And if it wasn't raining, it was hailing or sleeting. And the temperatures got very low. And it was just a bitter, bitter period of time. So I would walk down the street. I don't work at home. I have a little apartment in the neighborhood where I live in Brooklyn. And I just bundle up and go through the snow to my little room and spend, well, I spent the whole winter writing the book about winter.
Yes, yes. I think you talk about this little place you have in the book, actually.
Well, that was another place.
Oh, in another book.
Yeah.
Oh, not in this one. Because you tell a lot of things in this book about yourself, and in a way, this thing that it's a journal of diary or both of body and soul in a way, because there is a very physical element all through the book.
Well, I thought of this book as the history of my body. That's what I was trying to do. I mean, right in the very first page, I say something like, perhaps it's a good idea now to put aside your stories for the moment and try to remember what it has felt like to live inside this body since the first day you can remember of your life. So that was the project. A history of sensory data, a phenomenology of breathing. That's what this book is. But of course, the body and the soul cannot be separated. The mind and the body cannot be separated.
Yes, I know.
But I, therefore, you see, would make decisions. I write about my mother in this book at some length. Well, I felt that it was part of the story because it was in her body that my life began, and my body began. I write about all the different places where I've lived throughout my life. Well, those are the places that have sheltered my body from the elements. There was always a reason to put in what I did.
Yes, and also, of course, the body is quite important in all your love stories, that
well,
quite a few of them.
I think with everybody's love stories, the body plays a significant role, yes. Yeah. We haven't had telepathic love affairs.
Not yet.
Yes, right.
It'll come.
I hope not in my lifetime.
Yeah. This is of course you mentioned that part of the book, which is in fact quite substantial, which is the listing of your houses. You know the.
But I use this as a kind of mnemonic method, a springboard into memories about what was happening to me while I was living in that particular place. And there was an element of, I think, free association in some of this. I would think about the place and then remember the most essential things that were happening to me then. But I didn't really plan it. I knew that I was going to make the list and that I would fill it in. But each time I filled it in, I wasn't sure what details I was going to find.
Do you normally plan a lot your novels?
Yes and no. I generally have a sense of the shape of the book. The beginning, the middle, the end. A sense of the characters, a sense of what the story is going to be. And then I start writing, and everything changes. No novel that I've written has ever come out in the end the way I thought it would when I started. You're just discovering things along the way.
Yeah, well, yes, yeah. But you don't have a kind of schedule and like other writers I know.
Some writers have extensive outlines.
Incredibly.
But you see, in that funny way, then they're writing the book before they've written the book.
Yeah, well, that's what I feel myself. Yeah.
And then it's as if, why do it? You're not going to discover anything.
Yeah,
you're just sort of catching up to what you've already done. And I don't think I'd want to write that way. I couldn't write that way.
I agree. That's my case too. And and of course, it's the story of your body and all the things you said. But it's always impossible not to think when one's reading a book of a novelist, and some of the stories and some of the characters and some of the little things that you mentioned in this book, of course, sound familiar from other books. And the question I myself was keeping, well, no, 2 or 3 times I made myself was, is this real, or is there an element of fiction in the...
No element of fiction. No, I wouldn't propose to do a book like this, which is autobiographical. Fragmented, yes.
Yeah.
It's not a coherent narrative. It's made in little pieces, but everything is as accurately presented as I can possibly have done. Listen, memory is a very slippery business, and we forget a lot, and we often distort memories. But to the best of my ability, I wrote what I remembered.
So,
no fiction.
No fiction.
No fiction.
No, so Sandra is real.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I mean, you see, it was a fantastical experience.
Yes, well, yes.
You see this beautiful naked prostitute in Paris suddenly reciting Baudelaire. It was one of the most extraordinary things that's ever happened to me. Why would I make it up?
No.
Yeah,
well, if it happens, it's better, of course.
Yes.
It's difficult to think the situation, and it's amazing, you know.
It is amazing, but my view is that life is amazing, and the world is amazing, and unpredictable things happen. And how lucky one is to, encounter something like that.
Yes. And the verses you quote are the actual verses that she recited?
I think so. I might be wrong.
Yeah,
but I think it was
Baudelaire.
It was certainly Baudelaire.
And did you find out why she knew Baudelaire? I mean, doing the métier she was
there long enough to find out that. I was too overwhelmed by her knowledge of the poetry, and she really did recite it beautifully. But, it was a brief encounter.
Well, yes, as these things normally are, yeah. And she was beautiful, too, as you described her.
A little cross-eyed, but otherwise very...
Cross-eyed. Well, it couldn't be, I mean, nobody's perfect. Yeah, and... talking about lists, yes, and you mentioned, of course, Rabelais and Joyce, and this is in a way, there is a tradition in France of people who I mean, because I was thinking, I mean, it's nothing to do with your book, but I was thinking of Georges Perec, Je me souviens.
Yes. Well, Georges Perec is another writer I like very much.
Yes.
And he was fascinated by lists as well.
Yes, absolutely.
But I want to tell you about this book, Je m'en souviens.
Je m'en souviens.
The Perec. Do you know that it was inspired by a book by an American writer?
No, I didn't know that.
Joe Brainerd, who was a painter, artist, and occasional writer, who, let's see, he was born in 1942. He died of AIDS in 1993, something like that.
And the name is, sorry?
Joe Brainerd.
Brainerd.
B, like brain, A-R-D. Now, the interesting thing about this, I remember his book, which I think is a genius book, and one of the great books written in America during this period.
I see.
Joe Brainerd has been completely forgotten or never even discovered as a writer by large numbers of people. Well, what has happened, and I'm so happy to report this, do you know a collection of books in America called Library of America?
Yes, of course, yes.
The Library of America is a beautiful series of books. It's like the Pléiade editions in France. So all the classic American books in beautiful editions on, India paper, like Bible paper.
Less annotated than La Pléiade.
Yes. Well, they've been doing Library of America now, some special editions. And Collected Writings of Joe Brainerd is coming out in April of this year. And I'm happy to say I wrote the preface.
Oh, I see.
And he's a writer I love. And Perec, she had a friend, Harry Matthews.
Yes, Harry Matthews, a poet.
American writer who was a friend of Brainerd's,
yes,
but also lived in Paris a lot and was a friend of Perec's.
Oulipo.
That's right. Harry gave Perec the book of Brainerd. Brainerd said, "This is genius. I'm going to do one about France." And so he did his own I Remember. But if you look closely at the back, the last page, he thanks Joe Brainerd for the inspiration to do this book.
So it was Brainerd before Perec?
At least 7, 8 years before, something like that.
I see. Yeah, that's a wonderful story.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is my wife, Siri Hustvedt, I'm sure most people here know who I'm talking about, a wonderful writer, worked for about 3 years in New York City in a mental hospital, and as a volunteer writing instructor. And so she would do exercises with the patients, the ones who were willing to come and try to write something. She told me that every time she used the Joe Brainerd method, tell the students, right, I remember, that that was always the best class. They would always write things that they had forgotten. And she developed a theory that, in a sense, Brainerd discovered a memory machine. And the act of having a pencil or a pen in your hand and writing the words, I remember, is actually a physiological trigger to remembering things. And it's an amazing idea. Yeah.
Did you meet him?
Joe?
You met him?
You know, we shook hands once. But he was friends with many of the people that I know. But I just never really intersected with him. And then he died too young. He was only about 50. Yeah.
Well, that's good. The book is coming now.
Yeah.
You have to look
so I recommend everyone read it if you're interested in great American writing.
Yes.
For example, besides I Remember, there are other writings. A lot of them are very, very humorous. And there's one, and most of it was written when Joe Brainerd was 20, 21, 23. I don't think he wrote anything after he was 35. There's an idea of a sense of humor. One piece was called No Story. And the whole text was, I hope you've enjoyed not reading the story as much as I have enjoyed not writing it.
Very good. So it's a short.
That's a one sentence.
This Library of America it must be a short book, or
no? It's 500 pages.
There is a lot of material there.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah. Very good. Yes. Well. Some other thing, yes, because I don't know if we have some time, no?
Yeah.
And well, of course, cinema. I think you have to devote some attention to cinema, not just because of the films you've made, but it's interesting in this book and in Sunset Park as well, and some other occasions as well. This thing of telling films, telling films. I must say, in this particular case, I was very much impressed because I didn't know this film.
Good.
And
DOA.
DOA, Death on Arrival, no? It will be, and Con las horas contadas. I learned, reading the book in the translation by anagrama, that it was the title of the
film in
Spanish, which apparently was released in 1950. Yes, and Rudolf, how you pronounce
Mate. Rudolf Mate. I looked him up. Very interesting figure.
Very interesting.
He was a cinematographer first.
Yes, well, Dreyer.
He filmed The Passion of Joan of Arc, and Vampire, and many great films. And then eventually he wound up in America, in Hollywood, and he was a cinematographer. He had a long list of very good credits, And then he began directing.
No.
And the films are mostly
I've seen
B movies.
Yes. He has a western branded, which is wonderful.
Wonderful, yes.
Marcado a fuego in Spanish. I remember when I was a kid, I saw that film. I still sort of have
You remember
memories.
it vividly?
Yes, well, not vividly. It has some. Je m'en souviens un peu. But so you say it's pronounced, because I always thought that it would be Matti or Matt in English.
I think it's Mate.
Mate. With an accent.
There's an accent.
He was Polish.
Or Hungarian or Czech.
Hungarian or Polish. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We call him Rudolf Mate, which is funny in Spanish because Rudolf I killed.
Right. Well, he Frenchified his name, I think.
Yes, Mate, yes. Because in some dictionary, where I must confess, I looked when I read up in your book about his film, it's written without the accent. And apparently that's the man says in the dictionary that that's the proper way to in the original.
You know a lot more about this than I do. But the reason I put this film in is because there's a sequence in this film, DOA, with the actor Edmund O'Brien. Probably nobody here knows who he was. He was an actor and was in many American films. There's a moment when he finds out that he's been poisoned and he doesn't know how or why. And he runs out of the medical center and he starts charging through the streets like a crazy man. And I thought that this was the best representation I've ever seen in any film as a metaphor of what a panic attack is. And I'd just been writing in the book about panic attacks. And so this is the panic attack elevated to a ballet in a way. And I thought it was so extraordinary. I wanted to explore these images in my book. Yeah.
No, that works very well. But obviously, you enjoy telling film stories. I mean,
Well, listen, I wrote the Book of Illusions 10, 12 years ago. And in that book, of course, I invented movies that didn't exist. And I remember a friend of mine, Hal Hartley, you know who this is? The American director.
Filmmaker,
He said, you know, Paul, I think maybe written films are better than real films. Because you read it and it's perfect. Yeah?
Yes. Those were invented. But of course, you tell Williams Wyler's film
in Vestures of Our Lives
in Sunset Park, and it takes some, it's substantial in the book.
It's a thread throughout the book.
A thread that comes on. Yes. And something, a small memory of myself. You know, we met about 12 or 14 years ago when we had a conversation here when your anagrammate edition of Lulu on the Bridge was published, and we had and I remembered then, because at that time I was working on a film I eventually made.
Good.
And I remember, but I'm talking about your impressions on filming, which have stayed with me all my life.
Oh, really? What did I say?
Because you told me, because obviously we were in a way, you know, I was going to make this film quite late in my life after just writing books, and your experience before was like that, and we were talking over dinner with Jorge and Lali and some other friends, and I remember you said, well, yes, filming is terrible. It's terrible. I mean, you're going to suffer a lot. And you told me a story which I always remembered, and I've told, probably changing details, as these things always are, about in the film, telling the people in your crew from the beginning that you needed a car with a...
Yes, it's a great story. Yes.
Well, I think you must tell it.
All right, this is one of the most interesting experiences I had directing film, and it was a lesson in how you can live your anger through other people without having to explode yourself. There was a small scene in the film in which the lead actress is leaving, going off to the airport in a car, black town car. I wanted her to put the window down and lean out the window and wave goodbye to the man she loved, played by Harvey Keitel. It was Mira Sorvino, Harvey Keitel. Well, the way they make cars in America now, I don't know if it's true in Europe, windows in the back only go down halfway. So I said to the prop person, it's very important that we get an older model car so that the window goes all the way down, because I want Mira's body to stick out of the car. He said, fine, no problem, we'll do it. And so the day comes to do this scene, and there's the car sitting in front of the building, and I say to Jeff, I said, you know, it looks good, but let's check and see if the window in the back goes down. Well, we checked, and the window didn't go down, only halfway. And I thought, oh my goodness, you know, we're on such a tight budget. We're going to have to send this car back, get another car. It's going to take the whole day, and we just can't afford to do this. I felt really miserable. I said, Jeff, we have to replace it. And he was a man who was very good at his job. He took tremendous pride in his work. He had ordered the right car. It was the people from the company that had sent the wrong car. So I had the pleasure of watching my property manager get on his cell phone and start screaming and cursing at the people who had given him the wrong car. So I could remain calm and cool and look like the director who knew what he was doing. Well, he could go crazy, but his going crazy was expressing exactly what I was feeling.
But and what did happen? You couldn't have the.
We reversed the order of the shooting that day, and we did get the car later.
Oh, so you were lucky.
Everything worked out.
You were lucky.
Yes,
you know?
yes.
Because in Spain, in a low-budget film, you would have to have done the scene without the window coming all the way.
Well, he was a tough guy, Jeff Mazzola. That was his name. Yes.
No. And well, that was that experience, and of course, and then you went on making films. What is your idea about filmmaking now? I mean, do you still have?
I don't know. I don't have any projects in mind. I don't know. It's very difficult. The independent film world has collapsed everywhere. I mean, it collapsed first in America, and now it seems Europe is getting shakier and shakier. It's harder and harder to raise money for what we would call independent projects, and the market has collapsed too. It's very hard to get. Assume you can, by some miracle, raise the money to make your little film. Getting it shown in theaters is almost impossible now. I think this is why film festivals are proliferating all around the world, because it's the only chance to see non-commercial movies, because they just don't get shown anywhere. At my advanced age now, am I willing to spend 2 or 3 years of my life fighting to make a movie that 200 people are going to see? I'm not sure. I have to budget my energies now a little bit. You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yeah. And do you go to the movies? I mean, when there is things to see, you know?
Yes, I go. But we also, Siri and I, we watch a lot of movies at home. You know, we have a pretty enormous collection of DVDs. And then, so we're watching those. And then there's I was telling Isabel before, there's a fantastic television station in America called Turner Classic Movies. I know it's in Europe also, but the European version isn't very good. But the one in America is 24 hours, 7 days a week, movies. No commercials, just movies. And they are showing in mostly restored prints Hollywood films from the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. I have discovered so many films through this television network that I wouldn't have known about. Depression films, movies, you know, from the 40s, extraordinary things. And then they'll do, say, every month they'll have a featured director, a featured actor, because they're showing so many. So last month, for example, they had 31 films with William Powell in them. and I'd seen maybe 7 William Powell movies, but now we've seen 20 William Powell movies. It's great.
And do they show also European films or Japanese?
Occasionally. Usually late at night on Sunday, they show foreign films.
Like here, the same, yeah. We had the public television, because this is cable. I mean, this is
cable.
This is cable.
Yeah.
Public television in Spain some time ago was much better, and they showed a lot of films.
Well, you see, it's that billionaire Ted Turner, right?
That's Ted Turner. Yeah.
And I think he bought up the libraries of most of the studios for the American studios. So he owns these films, so he can show them for free. It doesn't cost them anything. With the European films, I think they have to, you know, buy them. So they're more American films, but still, it's a great education.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how you know, I don't want to be. I don't know where our boss is. You know.
Well, we can stop. I'm sure.
Can we go, Victor?
He's desperate to leave.
No. It's just because I have all the time. You know, I rather want to.
He's seeing Sandra in 20 minutes.
Yeah, and I'm going to recite some. Solo dos minutos. Or he gives 3 minutes.
3 minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
And so, well, I have so many things to ask you, but or to talk to, but. This story that, well, in fact, it's a way, I think this must be a nice way to close our conversation, because you are now going to sign books. And this is one of the wonderful stories in your book, the story of James Joyce and the lady.
Yes,
you know?
yes.
I don't know, as some people here haven't probably read the book, it's the story. I think
it's an anecdote.
You tell it.
It's an anecdote. One of my favorite writer stories. James Joyce in Paris in the 1920s, and a woman walked up to him at a party and said, "Oh, James Joyce, can I shake the hand that wrote Ulysses?" And Joyce looked at his hand and he said, "Let me remind you, madam, that this hand has done many other things as well."
And of course, you elaborate on that.
Yes, I do.
You elaborate on that. We won't tell, but there is a lot of elaboration on that anecdote. And of course, I think that people that now are going to have your signature must have that in mind.
Okay.
You know, that hand he's signing has done other things.
Other things. That's right. All right. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.